everyone. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see so many people out today for this very special program. I'm Dwight McBride. I'm the president of the New School, and I'm thrilled to be able to be here for the special event tonight for the New School's presidential visiting scholar, Bill T. Jones, and with his special guests who are joining us, Kamilah Forbes and Niegel Smith. In this Bill Chats series, as we're calling it, Bill, who is always the student, sits down for conversations with fellow artists and great thinkers, and we're pleased to be co-hosting this series with New York Live Arts. Bill Chats will be back in New York Live Arts on February 28th in conversation with Reginald Dwayne Betts, and then we'll be back here at the New School on March 21st with the author Jacqueline Woodson. I'm really looking forward to hearing this evening's conversation, so I'm not going to take much more time than just a few minutes here at the start to tell you a little bit about the Presidential Visiting Scholars and the program that brought Bill here to the New School. We established the program in 2021-22 as a way to expand our opportunities for students and faculty at the New School to engage with inspiring and provocative and groundbreaking scholars and artists. Our first Presidential Visiting Scholars last year were the renowned philosophers Judith Butler and Cornel West. For our second cohort of Presidential Visiting Scholars this year, we have looked to the performing arts, and we're extraordinarily proud and privileged that Bill T. Jones and scholar and theater artist Dr. Lisa B. Thompson accepted our invitations to join us. So now I am pleased to turn it over to my colleague, Aaron Hawk, who will introduce tonight's guest. Thank you.
Good evening. Before we proceed, the New School and New York Live Arts would like to acknowledge that we are located on Lenape-Hoking, the Lenape homeland. We offer our gratitude and care for its land and waters, and we acknowledge and pay respect to the Lenape peoples and to all indigenous people, past, present, and future, here and everywhere. I am honored tonight to read the bios of our speakers. First, our visiting presidential scholar, Bill T. Jones, fell in love with dance in his early days of college at Binghamton University. And in his long and profoundly successful career since, he has risen to become one of the most recognized and celebrated figures in the performing arts worldwide. He is the artistic director of New York Live Arts and artistic director and co-founder of the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company. His work as a dancer and choreographer is known for the powerful combination of artistic vision, deep personal meaning, and a fearless examination of important issues rooted in identity. He has created more than 120 documented works and collaborated extensively with an extraordinary list of musicians, filmmakers, theater directors, actors, and writers. He has won many major awards and honors, including Bessie's, Tony's, the Doris Duke Award, the Lucille Lortel Award, and a MacArthur Genius Grant. He is an elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, was celebrated by Kennedy Center Honors, was named an Office of the Order of Arts and Letters by the French government, and he has been named one of America's, quote, irreplaceable dance treasures, unquote, by the Dance Heritage Coalition. It is a real honor for us at the New School to welcome our Presidential Visiting Scholar, Bill T. Jones. Kamilah Forbes is an esteemed award-winning director and producer for theater and television. She currently serves as the executive producer at the world-famous Apollo Theater in Harlem. In her diverse body of work, Kamilah is noted for having a strong commitment to the development of creative works by, for, and about the hip-hop generation. This Howard University alum has won awards for both directing and producing, including the 2019 NBTF Harry Leon Hamlin Producer Award and an NAACP Image Award. Kamilah's directing credits include By the Way, Meet Vera Stark, written by Lynn Nottage, Blood Quilt, and Sunset Baby. She has also worked closely with Kenny Leon on The Wiz Live, A Raisin in the Sun, Mountaintop, and Stickfly on Broadway. She has produced several works for television, most notably the 7th season of the Tony Award and Peabody Award-winning series Russell Simmons Presents Deaf Poetry on HBO. Her most recent directorial work, Between the World and Me, aired as a special event on HBO and HBO Max to critical acclaim. This Route 100 Award winner and Sundance Fellow's most recent projects include directing the world premiere tour and theatrical adaptation of Ta-Nehisi Coates' best-selling novel, Between the World and Me. In addition to her work at the Apollo Theater, Kamilah is set to direct the premiere of Soul Train alongside Questlove, Dominique Morisseau, and Camille A. Brown on Broadway. And last but not least, Niegel Smith is a Bessie Award-winning theater director and performance artist. He is the artistic director of New York City's Obie Award-winning theater, The Flea, guiding the organization through its refounding as a hub for experimental art by Black, brown, and queer artists. He is also a board member of ART New York and was a ringleader of Willing Participant, an activist organization that whips up urgent poetic responses to crazy shit that happens. Smith has received residencies, grants, and fellowships from organizations such as the Brooklyn Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, New York Stage and Film, Sundance Theater Lab, and many others. His current directing projects include The Ritual of Breath is the Right to Resist, a multimedia opera and community ritual commissioned and produced by Hopkins Center for the Arts, Susan Laurie Park's Plays for the Play Gear, produced by the Public Theater and Taylor Mack, and Matt Ray's The Bark of Millions, produced by Pomegranate Arts and Nature Darlings. His theater work has been produced at the Alley Theater, the Classical Theater of Harlem, Playwright Horizons, and the Public Theater, to name a few. And his participatory walks and performances have been produced by numerous museums and cultural institutions. I'd like to welcome everyone to the stage and thank you all for being here this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hello, Hakeem. I'm very honored to be asked to be the Presidential Scholar, and this is our first public discussion in that capacity, and I look forward to having many more. When Bill T. Jones Organizing Company merged with the historic Dance Theater Workshop, we changed a number of things, but we also had to find out what was our mission. And I know that we were there to support artists that, movement-based artists, artists that use their bodies to investigate. But there was also this feeling I had that some of the work that was happening on our stage, and there's some very interesting work, some head-scratching work, I thought that shouldn't we have a forum to talk about that? In other words, the humanities. And that's where we came up with our Live Ideas Festival that happens yearly, dealing with, this year it's on Planet Justice, and something I love talking, I love reading, I love ideas, and so on. So the Bill Chats were born out of that. It was controversial because people didn't understand why a performer would like to sit and talk to people, because that's what we do in some romantic way. We're not supposed to be talking. We're supposed to actually be demonstrating, right? So the Bill Chat started, and I thought that they were going to be, we said we would have, my associate director, Janet Wong, is sitting right here. I thought that we were going to be coming up with topics that were germane to the downtown performance art world. Now that's a mouthful. Downtown performance arts world. And we have been, as Niegel and I were just discussing now, what is audience? Who are you speaking to and for in your work and in your discourse? So Initially, I thought it was going to be things that preoccupied the dancers and choreographers, many of whom were people who, it was not a terribly diverse world. It was not. The avant-garde that I'd come out of is not diverse. And that was something I was making my peace with the hopes that over time and programming and what have you, you could make the audience that you wanted to have. There was a desire to say and talk about things that mattered to whom. Fast forward. I have another career, as you know. I do work for the commercial theater. I've won 2 Tony Awards, one for Flea, which Niegel and I, this is where we first worked together. He was my associate director. And the other was Spring Awakening. Both of them I was very proud to have worked on. But there was something that happened recently when I had 2 more shows up. One, I was Paradise Square, work that was about the draft rights in the 1860s, and a second one that was called Black No More, based on a scandalous satirical novel by the infamous George Schuyler, a man who started out, I think he was a secretary to W.E. Du Bois, but he was angry as hell at the Harlem Renaissance, a black man that was going to reveal all those motherfuckers. Oh, excuse me, right? Yeah. But he was going to reveal them all. He ended his life actually in Barry Goldwater camp. So, but he was writing a book about race and satire and so on. Tariq Trotter, John Ridley, Scott Elliott asked me if I would join the team. I was concerned that we couldn't make a piece about race. I said, do you think we're going to laugh about race? And this is almost, that must have been 6, 7 years ago when we had those initial conversations, long before George Floyd and so on. And we were going to have a laugh riot because the country, quote, was ready to laugh about race, they said, you know. I said, oh, really? Well, I think we made a very interesting work. Beautiful music. John Ridley's a powerful playwright. Scott Elliott knows his stuff in developing, in directing, and I was the choreographer. Well, the show, it did not do what we wanted it to do, and that's life in the commercial theater. But I had dinner with Scott some months after, you know, because we were all kind of shaken by what had happened, and I had not read everything that people were saying. I read through a lot of it today, believe it or not. Someone referred to it, it's being indigestible. This take on race is indigestible. Indigestible to whom? And I think I know what they mean. Scott did as what many white directors must have discovered in the era of the George Floyd, and here's looking at you, white American theater. Say it again.
We see you, white American theater.
See, I even have difficulty getting it all out, what they were really saying, and it was an incredibly divisive document. When Scott and I finally came back together over dinner one night with my husband Bjorn and I, and Scott and his husband, and he was saying he felt bruised, the black cast did not respect him. Matter of fact, they were in his space saying he had no right to be doing it, and so on and so forth. And I had beat him up a few times myself, you know, because there was something wild and angry, you know, about this. And how dare you, this well-intentioned white man, do this? Well, he has every right to do it. But when he said to me that night over dinner, he said, I've decided I'm done with that, you know. I think that George Floyd has done real damage to the black theater, because black people have no ability now to satirize themselves. They cannot make fun. Now, Kamilah, I hope you're listening to this, my love, right? And I thought, when he said that to me, I said, well, my God, well, there were so many black plays. And I think, according to some of the research I did today, there are from the vantage point of 2021, 7 new plays coming to Broadway, all with Black authors, right? And most of them failed. So, work fails. Not everything works. But I felt, of course, this is a trick in America. If they, quote, the ruling class, allows you in, you better hit a home run. Yeah, you better, because they're only doing, they don't really mean it anyways. They're just like trying to, so if you fail, you don't get a second or third chance. There was that kind of creeping feeling. And I thought, I want to sit with 2 other people who are directors, but also administrators, people who are building audiences, building constituencies, and ask them, from your point of view, and they happen to be people who are Black people as well, how are you feeling right now? What happened? Did we blow it? You know, because we're supposed to win. Black folks are supposed to, particularly on the stage, you're supposed to know how to get up there and throw down, and they're supposed to fall in love with you, and they will take care of you and your children for, I'm going off the edge right here, right? Yeah. But, so, here we are, and I asked both Niegel and Kamilah if they would entertain a couple of questions, and the first one that I had was, what is your feeling right now about theater? And do either one of you want to start with, before we go to Black theater or performance? It's bizarre for us as well, you know. Big brother over here, big sister.
I mean, you know, I'm one that always tends to look at the world critically, but also at a moment of half full. I think it's an exciting time for theater. And I'll say this because, you know, in the last 30 years, and I'm going to speak about it from a point of leadership. I mean, on this stage, we are looking at 3 Black cultural arts leaders of institutions here solely in New York City. When I look across the landscape of this country and I see the number of people of color in leadership across nonprofit theaters, off-Broadway theaters, Broadway producers as well, the number has never looked this way as it does today in this particular moment. So for that particular fact, I think it's quite encouraging. I think it's a quite interesting time in regards to who's actually pulling the levers and making decisions at our cultural arts institutions across the country, and not just in theaters, but also performing arts centers as well. Now, the other side of the factor is that we also, you know, I'll just leave it there and I'll toss it to Niegel. I'll come back to the rest of my thoughts.
I can't wait for the rest of your thoughts, but I will. Like I've been thinking about your question, and I think a lot about invitation, and I think about invitations because I think about we've been so separated recently, and coming back.
The pandemic.
The pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the pandemic separating us and isolating us. But I've always thought about invitations. I've always thought about, like, why are we asking someone to show up to a live event? To give their body, their time, their voice, their breath for this moment, you know, when they could be at home or they could be out at dinner with their friends. And like, so when I think about theater now, I think about how much more urgent that invitation better be for me to get up and get out. And how clear that artist or that producing institution needs to be about asking me to show up. And I think about how thrilling it is because it makes us we better get damn clear about why we exist and what we're offering to the culture and what we're part of. And I also think about the reverse of the invitation. I'm thinking specifically now about the mission of the Flea that I run, that like we hold space for community and we also go out to the community, so we better receive the invitation and show up. You know, I had a great conversation with Callie Girard, one of Kamilah's colleagues the other day, about the uptown, downtown invitation. you know? So let's, yeah.
How do you mean uptown, downtown invitation?
Well, you know, I run a downtown institution, one of those places that is like, we up to art because we got to be about the art, and it's not about the commerce, it's about this thing I'm trying to work out in my practice, this experiment. And then there's certain considerations and freedoms I think we get to have in that. But there's, and more specifically, you know, one of the communities we specifically work with is the Black community. And there's a Black art making practice that is centered in Harlem as well. And what is the exchange of questions and ideas and of audience and of supports? And so what is the symbiosis? So that invitation, when I talk about uptown, downtown, I'm talking about Harlem to downtown.
Right,
I'm not talking about midtown.
Yeah. Oh, that's the geography. There's a story in that geography, isn't it? Yeah. Well, so what about even just use the term theater right now? I mean, I know that what you often are, from your own work, you experiment with forms that sometimes walk the line between what is theater and what is experiential being in life. But do you see yourself as a theater maker? And do you as well, Kamilah?
I like to describe myself as a storyteller and a cultural worker. Because I don't, you know, sometimes we get so confined by boundaries of theater, just that idea. And, you know, I think labels that are far more open and barriers that are far more gray are a much more comfortable place for me to be in. And what's exciting is that I'm seeing a whole generation of theater artists or theater artists or storytellers or cultural workers that are actually adopting a very similar practice. That this idea of silos is no longer where we want to sit. Silos, whether it's, yeah, sure, I work in television and film, but I tell stories there, just as I tell stories in an AI project, just as I tell stories in an immersive project that I'm working on, right? Like that's the connective factor is that I bring culture, I reflect culture, I build culture, and I tell stories throughout that. But that's what makes it such an exciting time to me, is that I think that there's so many artists, there's such a diversity of aesthetics in a way I think in Black performance right now that I have not seen in the last 20 to 25 years. Even, you know, Bill, as you mentioned, those shows that were on Broadway, I mean, just to name a few of them, like Strange Loop and Slave Play, right? Thoughts of a Colored Man for colored girls that year, right? All aesthetically and vastly different from one another, expressing forms, sitting in, you know, playing with satire, not necessarily a realistic, as they would say, your kitchen sink play, right? And that's very exciting that you know, institutions, creators had space to bend and build beyond those boundaries.
So the powers that be were doing God's work. They were giving talented people a platform, and they were not cynical about it. They put it up there, and the rest is owed to the Darwinian marketplace.
Oh, hold on.
I don't know if I'd characterize it like that.
Well, I mean, what happens in the commercial theater? So if you're not complaining that they don't give you, we haven't had our chance, we haven't had a chance, then we get our chance, and somehow it doesn't make the numbers. So COVID, what is that?
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, Broadway sits in sort of this American cultural imagination as the artistic pinnacle of success. And that's one thing that I have to say that really riles me up and irks me, because at the end of the day, Broadway is a tourism-driven economy that its foundation is based on high rental estate and exorbitant ticket prices, right? That is the basis of the machine. And amongst that, I think that very talented artists have found ways to still hold a high level of artistic integrity and create beautiful things. But at the end of the day, the machine that runs it is an economic one that has nothing to do with artistic merit. And when we talk about those shows that were open, that were able to get a theater during that time period, they were, the time period was a time period when the Broadway market as a whole was down and continues to be down. I mean, if we look at it now, right, they're saying right now that 25%, close to 25 to 30% of Broadway audiences have still not returned. So we're still not going to see pre-Broadway, pre-pandemic numbers for another 2 years, simply because it's a tourist-driven economy, and tourism has not come back to New York City yet since the pandemic. And so technically, so that all tells me these shows were the first out the gate and were not set up for success at the end of the day, because audiences were literally not coming out of their homes yet to see theater. So it was a recipe not for success for those shows, and it pained me when I saw those headlines during that time period, because we knew exactly what was going to happen. That it was going to say, "See, look, we let y'all in, and it didn't work. Audiences don't want to come see Black work," and running a Black theater uptown, I know that to be the furthest thing from the truth.
Right. Yeah, so it was not a referendum on the desirability or the talent of Black creators. It was purely just a tough spot. So are you feeling, in your own work, both of you work in different ways, but are you feeling up-tempo? Are you feeling positive about the making, the whole project of building audiences and performing?
Wow, it's mixed. It's absolutely mixed. I have one project that is thrilling, absolutely thrilling. It's called The Ritual of Breath is the Right to Resist. And it's a multi-mixed media opera community work. And it is so intentional in how it builds its community. So the offering happens in 7 movements. And so there are 7 rituals corresponding with those movements. And 6 of the rituals are done in community in the weeks leading up to the performance offering. And through the project, we partner with different organizations and co-conspirers in the Movements for Black Lives to own and hold one of those rituals, to call their community into participation.
Could you give me an example of what these rituals are?
Yeah, so I was at Dartmouth, and the Shabazz house, Betty Shabazz house, they held a ritual around breath and breathing. And so it was a somatic practice, followed by a conversation with Eric Garner's mother, where we talked about breath and filling ourselves with breath and moving forward in the movement and what actions we were going to do next with our breath. And then that ended with a procession towards the theater. And that ritual was made by the students and professors in that house. Okay? So they're prompted by the work. And so there are these 6 rituals that the community has agency over, and simultaneously we're building a community choir. And so people want to be at the work because it is their work. They own it with us, as well as the professional artists who've made this offering in the center of it. And so that kind of practice I'm very excited about in terms of being with our audience and the making and the co-making. You know, this is always interesting to me. Is like, what is, I'm not interested in the audience, I'm interested in a participant, in creating that space. Where I have a lot of questions is, I run a theater that happens to be in Lower Manhattan, and I'm like, who cares about Lower Manhattan right now? In my like in terms of like going out and getting to a performance, people are like, what is happening in my local community? And so that question around like, what does it mean to have a building and a space, and ask people to come to that space right now? It's something we're wrestling with and working with. Yeah.
I know at New York Live Arts we have succeeded in a merger of the historic Dance Theater Workshop, Bill T. Jones Organizing Company. We have gotten our house in order. We have shown that we have a sustainable model, which was a big deal. We have a board of directors that's there, and they're asking, like, where do you want to go? And they're even asking questions about where do you see yourself in 10 years, which is a legacy question. And so we now Janet Wong, who is a sort of brilliant lead curator, and we're looking for works that have to fit certain criteria. One of those is it has a kind of formal rigor, which sounds like what you're describing. But I also am, and I think, Kamilah, what you were saying in trying to disabuse me of this idea of the commercial theater, that I was told by a board member who is in that, don't say commercial, it turns people off. Well, okay, what do you call what happens in Midtown, right? You know, well, it's somehow well, I don't care. They told me try to talk about it without using the word commercial, right? And one of these articles I have here today said, let's face it, for people of color, Broadway actually represents, when you get the check, it's a sustained check. It has the benefits that you need as a working artist. You have exposure to a wide demographic of people, you get paid more. So there is something, Kamilah, that says that it is a kind of a marker for us. What are we doing? We want to make wild outsider work with the idea that some of that work is going to hit, and it's going to actually be able to appeal to a broader group of people. So the work that you're describing now is bespoke in a way, isn't it? It is very, very close to the bone. It's quite elevated. I am still trying to, like we were talking before with our wonderful, the president, I come from potato pickers. You both are from North and South Carolina, textile industry, working class people. I don't know about your background, Kamilah, but a lot of us are shot out of a cannon that you're supposed to do better than your parents did. So I've always been trying to make wild art, and the place where I could make the wild art was the white avant-garde. Yeah. With the idea that someday, as I grew up, I would have grown around me an ecology that makes some money. And that is, at 71 years old, I'm still wrestling with that expectation. So are we completely free of the market model?
Yeah, no, I don't think we're free of the market model. And the market model, I think, always has some sense of existence, whether that is on the form of even running a nonprofit, right? At the end of the year, we have our balance sheet. And we have, where's contributed revenue versus earned revenue? What are those works that are going to help earn us revenue in order to balance out our very mission-driven work, right? Mm-hmm. That conversation, because of the society, we live in a capitalistic society because of that, is always going to be a part of the conversation. I think the question that we have as art makers is that, where does that conversation lie within the art making process? And that's where I think I get very, I get very protective, particularly for Black artists, and wanting to create safe haven under which we can have the same amount of freedom to just be free, to be free of market constraints, to exist, to be as wild as possible, as you say, Bill, to be
and fail,
and fail. And I think it's up to institutions also to be able to create that safety net, to create a financial safety net for artists like Niegel, like Bill T. Jones, to be able to think wildly and fail and not have to worry about, well, does this mean I can't pay my rent next month, right? Which is not a consideration for you fabulous folks, but for many colleagues in the field, it is. And this is dangerous simply because, that kind of conservatism begins to affect the aesthetic. It begins to affect the output of work. Because people then tend to be too safe. And we as Black artists should be as free as possible. So I do put that on institutional constraints, and I think, which is a big part of why we at the Apollo, we started what's called our 21st Century Canon campaign, which was basically a new work fund to build, commission, and develop new works by and for the 21st century canon, specifically and chiefly commissioning Black artists, right, on year-long residencies to build new work and to providing that safety net. And I hope that, and I'm beginning to see, there's other institutions in the field that are continually picking up that mantle. You know, and when I think about the Flea and these sort of the change in strategic direction right now for Black and brown artists, I think that's a revolutionary moment in time that we're dealing with, where the Flea's history, Niegel, was 20 years prior?
Yeah, 20 years.
20 years prior. And so now we're seeing more and more organizations that are focused on providing that safe haven, providing that incubator for Black and brown artists to soar, I think is going to make a huge difference in the kinds of canonizing work over the next decade or the next 2 decades when we look back on this moment in time. And I think it's more important that we continually hold other institutions accountable to do the same.
So, Kamilah, you're saying your practice, the way you make your art, will have a direct relationship to the public that comes to see it. If there's integrity and the way, what were you saying? You were saying about you are very protective of the process of making the art. How does that work in capitalism in a very expensive art form thing, you know, live performance with real people and all? How does that work?
Yeah. Well, I think it works a couple of ways. I mean, I think, you know, we built again, which is why I talk about the 21st Century Canon Fund. We built a fund in order, with contributed dollars, in order to provide residency and commissioning space for artists to sit in that incubation space and for as long as possible. And it's almost like, you know, that opportunity to create a bubble. To create, to jump, to fail, before having to contend with market-driven constraints. How many tickets will this show sell? Will this move to Broadway? Will this be a commercial success, et cetera, et cetera? How can we provide that for artists? And the hope is that that other institutions will also do the same. As it relates to audiences, I think that's a same conversation, one and the same as well. I think it's important that we as institutions are not only asking artists to take risk, we're also asking risk-taking of our audiences as well. And we're building and cultivating those audiences from the very beginning, the early beginning, as the process is being built, so that we're building and cultivating a new breed of audience that is not building an expectation necessarily towards what they might have seen on commercial stages or what they might have seen several generations before. But building an audience, but cultivating the artists and the audience all at the same time.
I'm so glad to hear all of your points, Kamilah, and especially this point about cultivating this audience alongside of the art making practice, because that's where I think we're also seeing a great deal of success, is that our audience doesn't want to show up to just a finished thing and just received and be like, oh, I paid my money, I got something beautiful. They want to be invited into a conversation. They want to feel, they want to be necessary. And we're seeing this across all kinds of media and form. That like, where is my voice in this? Why am I showing up? Where is me in it? Me. And so inviting our audience early on in the process to be in conversation and dialogue with the work, presenting it from the jump of like, what are the questions? What is this artist wrestling with? I mean, we have, I think, the great privilege of living in such a curious city. So many folks want to show up and want to ask and want to be part of it. And it's our pleasure to be able to say, hey, you can come and do that where we are.
Yeah, you know, there's let's say it's an old Sufi saying, for a man who wears leather shoes, the whole world is covered with leather. So I take some responsibility for the fact that I don't know if I feel that I can ask an audience to take risk. I was taught that I have to seduce them into taking risk. I have to wag my ass and bat my eyes and promise things, you know. And I know, it's a whorish way of being, right? Where did I learn that, you know? So, but now I hear you saying that we want to cultivate audiences that want to take risk, and you see audiences that are just dying to get in there with you. And,
Yeah.
you guys are really wonderful colleagues. You know, I need some of what you're living on, because I've accepted, quite frankly, now that the generation younger than I am are going to be able to achieve things and not have to fall back on the things that I had to fall back on. Yeah. So so it sounds like you both are very positive about the future.
I would say that. And I also, you know, I want to say it's funny because when I think of Nights at the Apollo and this idea of invitation, of the idea of participation, our audiences can't wait to participate.
We have famous audiences.
You gotta hold them back to participating, right? But to me, that's also the need to not, and it's inherent in the culture, is that I'm not waiting for you to impress me. I'm actually here with you. I'm actually here with you and the work. And if you're gonna jump, I will be there with you. You know, it's like, you know, there's nights of amateur night where, you know, you hear that signifying, you know, where somebody might hit a wrong note. Go ahead. It's okay, baby. We got you. I'm here with you, right? That we know that. We know that. It's something cultural there. But to me, that's also, is that if you're going to jump, I'm going to say how high. And I'm jumping with you in that participation. And we've taken that model that is so inherent to our culture and tried to find ways to institutionalize that into our practice, into our art making practice, into how we're inviting invitations in, whether it's to an open rehearsal of a new work, whether it's to an invitation into creating what's called our Salon series, which is another developmental piece, right? Like, so it is that sort of participatory call and response, which means to me that audiences are already there. They want to be there. They want to be a part of the community and not to just be spoken at, but brought along with. And we've definitely found that at the Apollo.
You know, Kamilah, do you remember when you and I had a lovely luncheon and we were talking about, we should find a TV program from the 70s and then we should like do that thing on it and we should make a musical. I mean, remember that? What were we working at? How the strategy of what Broadway, or what the, here's that word again, the theater that makes money, and therefore we had to find some product from pop culture and then do a kind of hoodoo on it so that it suddenly felt contemporary and relevant and all. Do you remember that conversation?
I absolutely do.
We never got back to it. We were making a short list of things that were like, we were saying, this was weird. I think we even said The Cosby Show as the musical. I mean, I never watched The Cosby Show, but do you remember, what was your impression of what that reasoning was?
Well, I mean, I think that to me, that impression was also about reflection. I think, you know, we don't have that many. When I think about Broadway and I think about the numbers, when I think about commercial theater in general, just the vast numbers, I think about it in the same breath as television. There are vast numbers of people consuming the reflection of our culture in these theaters every single night. 1,500 seats, 8 shows a week, sometimes are running 52 weeks. If you're lucky, you're running a multiple of years. Look at Lion King, it's in its 20th year. Like, you know, or Motown the musical, or et cetera, et cetera. So there's there's power in mass media and what are the images and the stories that are being told, that are being broadcast on these very large mediums and spaces. And I think that's what we were getting at. Like, you know, where are those opportunities? There's a project I just worked on the other day called the 1619 Project. And it just premiered on Hulu. It was a project by Nicole Hannah-Jones, and it's a docuseries. Now, the reason why I bring it up, yes, it's a documentary series, which again is storytelling. And I remember walking through the airport with the 1619 t-shirt on. Now, there was a book and it was a New York Times article. And as I was walking through the airport, like I was getting, the right on, sister sign on the t-shirt by all the airport workers and folks working at the airport and folks behind the desk. And if some of these folks, I was like, okay, maybe some of them might have read the New York Times article. For a long time, I didn't read it. I actually listened to the podcast, which I think is telling first. But now with this opportunity of 1619 as a Hulu series, now just opens up the conversation to a broad number of millions of mass media of people to be in a conversation of the origin story of African Americans here in this country for the last 400 since 1619, in the highest, I think, masses possible is extraordinary. And I think that's what we were getting at. So it's almost like it's not an either or, but it's an and as cultural workers, as storytellers. We always want to be in conversation with people, whether that's with, at times in my theater, there's 10 people who are here for an open rehearsal, or at times when we're broadcasting out with millions. And both are valid and important, but also both have very different implications. And I think that was the line under which I believe we were navigating in that conversation.
And Niegel, before we open up there, one thing that touches me very much is when you and I were working together on Flea, and I could see your own work, which was very unique. And you said that when you make work, you have did you say your mother in mind? And when I saw how your mind worked, I said, wow, who is your mother? And I was saying to you just back there that when I was trying to find my voice, who was I? I was certainly not making it for Estella and Gus. I was making it for Merce Cunningham and Trisha Brown, And, well, what about that? Is that level of intimacy and directness still drive you as a creator?
Yes. And I actually said 3 people I have in mind when I make 4. There's my mother. I want her to be able to glean something from it, to be in it, be in the conversation. There's some aesthetic God.
Oh, an aesthetic God.
There's an aesthetic God that I want to be pleased.
Do they have a race? Do they have a gender? Do they have a...
No. They're about form and balance and contrast and tension. It's all of that craft shit that I have to be able to sit out there and have please that aesthetic God who's up here. And then there's myself. I actually want to be surprised and delighted by work that I've made. And so that means giving up something or creating space for the other co-makers to create, so that when I'm experiencing it, I'm always experiencing it in some fresh way. But the mother piece, I know why you latched onto it, because I latch on it to it too. Because my mother is working class. You heard earlier, she's a textile woman, now works at Walmart. Doesn't have higher education, filled with deep love and deep engagement with stories and storytelling. I want her to be able to sit down with my work and be able to be invited into it, to experience it. And that's so important to me, that my loved ones, my community is with me in it. Because why else am I taking up space,
Well, because you're a lonely genius.
No, thank you.
No. Isn't that what they told us in modernism?
Yeah.
That the artist is a lonely genius who comes up with a language, and sometimes in their lifetime, sometimes after their lifetime, the world catches up with them. You should not expect, now this is all the stuff that I think I gleaned from the people I was paying attention to, is that you've got to suffer, you will often be misunderstood, you will be underpaid, and yet there will be a coterie of very special individuals who will get it. And sometimes they will carry your flame forward. So good for you that you didn't have to, that wasn't the only thing that you were dealing with. I'm saying this kind of because I tend to be confessional, it's true, but I'm saying this because I'm trying to come to grips with my theater, New York Live Arts. I'm trying to come to grips with why is it important that I have a diverse audience. And what do I have to do to have a diverse audience? And what is good art? What is bad art? What is high art? What is low art? Those, nobody talks this way anymore, but definitely back in the 70s, 80s, we were talking that way. So thank you for that. Thank you, thank you. Should we open up to the room? Is anybody out there? You see that we have microphones here and here, and we would love to entertain what's going on in your heads.
Taking the opportunity, let's not leave the blank space here.
It's yours.
Thank you. First of all, I am so honored to be with the three of you. It's such a joy. I will stop there on the gush. And I want to speak to a point, I think, as an old white woman who has wandered into this extraordinary expanse of a universe and am continually discovering how the tremendous ignorance with which I was raised, me, so highly well educated, right? But the ignorance of my world, you know, I was born before the war, so I've lived the whole trajectory. So I've had all the privileges, you know, I've lived during the low times, the high times of all the white people who were getting ahead. And in the last, I guess, 5 years, but especially in since COVID, the great gift of COVID to me is my introduction to all of you, the fact that I could connect with all of you on video. I could draw and paint around the world on video. Bill, we know each other from Roger Berkowitz's
The Hannah Arendt Virtual Reading Group, yes.
That's right. Mm-hmm. What, there are 60, we're up to 200 people from around the world who are reading together. So I want to say to the question you posed, pretty much what Niegel and Kamilah said, that we don't have to reduce ourselves. We can expand ourselves. And through our expansion and our engagement and our different voices and our different ways of connecting with one another, we are opening spaces. We are creating whole new ideas of what it means to come together through art, through conversation, through dialogue, through argument, through crisis. And I say, keep at it. Just go more to the edge. I think it's been said many times, build it and they will come. And I think all of you and many, many colleagues and leaders from the whole non-white world whose voices were too little known to those of us who are white have done an extraordinary job teaching. It just takes a long, long, long time for a lot of people to learn.
And a lot of generosity, right?
A lot of openness, a lot of comfort with asking questions. Well, how come I didn't know that? How is that story different from mine? And understanding it really is different from mine. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Jodine Dorsey, and I'm, of course, honored to be here with the three of you. You guys talked about cultivating an audience, and I wrote my question down because I know, Kamilah, you working in TV and film and other mediums of storytelling like podcasting, live events, visual arts, do you find yourself having to cultivate an audience differently? And how does that look when, for TV and film, you only have 5 minutes to capture the audience's attention? Is there an actual way to cultivate an audience for other storytelling mediums?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're different tools, right? I mean, hi, Jodine. It's great to Jodine's also a really brilliant podcast producer. But And every tool and medium of storytelling, I think, is different. I learned with television, you've got an even shorter window of time before people that we don't have to deal with in theater, but we'll turn the channel and move on. So how are your visuals as arresting? How does the rise and climb as a director? I'm always about the waves. How do I make sure that I capture the wave that's big enough and that will string you along so that you will not turn until there's another wave, right? And that was something really interesting, I think, that I had to garner, I think, when we did the adaptation for Between the World and Me for HBO. So interestingly enough, it was all about very strong visuals, because I wanted to pull an audience in a very different way during a time under which many people were watching television on their laptops. So we made a film that was almost facsimile as you were watching it on your laptop. The visuals were very tight, they were very close up, and because of audience habits. So it's a very different muscle, I think, but all have the same tenets, as how do we make sure to keep our audiences engaged in the storytelling. And we have to present a beginning, middle, end, but we use different tools.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think, Kamilah, it's very important that I drop this, because we use the term storytelling now without a second thought. But that used to be the highest form of heresy in the world that I came from. They said, leave the storytelling to Hollywood and television. We want to deal with something which is non-linear, something which is, and it, quite frankly, I think some of the work, I spent a lot of time watching bad drama. It's true. I love it, and particularly give me a Korean historical drama with a dashing lead and a beautiful damsel. I love those sort of things. However, the work that when I read or the way that I make is often nonlinear. So I wonder if that idea about art making had a sell-by date on it. That really, when you get down to it, the public really wants, and I've heard this said to people who are talking about the Russian constructivists, Tatlin and those people like that, who were all forced to stop making their abstract work when the tide of politics, because they said the people actually could not understand what they were doing. Somebody else said, you have to realize that Tatlin and that group who was trying to make the advanced art for those people wanted Giselle. Yeah, and that's always a kind of slap in the face for the avant-gardist, isn't it? Particularly if you have a leftist mission, that I'm doing this for the masses of people. But for what it's worth, it's a distinction, yeah.
I do want to say I'm still pushing back at storytelling. In certain places, I'm making so many places, but in certain spaces, and particularly at the Flea, I'm curious about expression. Expression that is conscious of an exchange. So I am attempting an expression to my audience, to my participants, that might not look like a linear story. But I do want to understand what my tools are for getting my expression across, You
want to understand what your tool, you mean, what are you using?
So it might be a somatic practice. It might be a practice of moving from a music into somatic, then to text and back. But it's not necessarily, so that the story gets mapped, not just here in a linguistic way.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyone else?
That's right.
Hi. My question
Love
is
the hat.
Oh, thank you. So my question is I have an accent, so I'm going to pronounce it a little strange. Kamilah?
Yeah, that's right.
Right, okay. So I want to ask in terms of the Apollo Theater, right? You said that you allow the audience to become engaged. So my thought process is that a part of like CPRing with your audience so that it's a way of marketing? Right, because
interesting.
I mean, I'm just saying, right? So naturally, as humans, when we have a conversation with someone, we CPR, we get to know them better. So my thing is this a way of allowing them to become so engaged that they feel that this project is theirs? Is that the emotion that you're trying to connect with, and is it a part of your marketing strategy?
That's a word you're using. You're saying CPR?
Yes, creating personal relationships.
One more time. One more time.
Creating personal relationships.
I don't know that
Great.
term. Yeah, yeah. Creating personal relationships, of
Right.
course. Yes, right.
So I think it's a complete opposite. I think that's something that the Apollo Theater is an institution that's been around for 89 years. And that the ownership was never about the institution reaching out to the community. The community claimed the theater very early on as its own and as its home. So the personal relationship that ownership was created by community, by the residents of Harlem, at a time when the country and Black America deemed Harlem as a capital of Black America, and the Apollo stood right in the center of that. So that idea of call and response that happens inside of the theater is one that's quite natural, one that is not that we necessarily market out to the world as invitation, but that is as organic as breathing. Many times we talk about our space, our theater as a sanctuary. And it's not because necessarily we have sat in, as our strategic planning sessions and said, we are going to become this. We actually have always been that. A place of worship, a place of sanctuary, simply because, as Black people, and the highest form of expression is about that give and take, is about bringing your full and highest self to every and all space, right? And that's what happens in the theater most every day. And so I believe it's our job as institution leadership to provide space. Literally to provide space of what is organic and what is believed to be true of this institution, and just continually move that forward.
So do you all buy that's the role that Black people have played, do I dare say in the theater or in the arts, bringing your, what's the term you said? Your complete?
I said your full and highest self.
Your full and highest self. It's kind of wonderful. Do you buy it?
I better not leave the house without taking my full and highest self. I mean, it's just like the way I was raised. Don't go out that door like that. Put your chin up, boy. Right. Where you going?
Right.
You're going to be there.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
It's just inscribed on me.
Yeah. And I think I was doing it for years, and I didn't know why it was sometimes too much. Yeah. But like I say, I'm a confessional kind of guy. Right. Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Darren Lyons. Pleasure to meet you guys. Hi, Kamilah.
Hi.
I want to broach on something you said, Bill, about high art. I'm going to take the conversation on the left about high art and address the idea of stratification within entertainment. And decidedly for this particular conversation, Black art, although it could be, the lens could be pulled back. Last night I was having dinner with some friends, and we were speaking about the Tyler Perry experiment, and how do we codify what is success within the industry? So here's a guy who's built, his own studios, has had successful plays, is by all intents a billionaire from his craft and his business exploits, but he's never regarded in the same breath as you, and for television or film, Spike Lee or some of our other Broadway directors. How do we talk about commercial success in the field with a guy like that, with Tyler, as opposed to people who put up cerebral, erudite work, 5 people in the seats, right? But we feel good about high art or high-end work. How do we talk about that stratification and classification in black theater, black art, black film?
Thank you. Either one of you want to take that on?
Sure. I mean, I think art's primary, not sole role, but a primary role is an opportunity to define humanity. And I think what we've always seen in American culture, particularly around whiteness, is a broad range of art, and therefore a broad range and expression of humanity. What we haven't, and what we're just beginning to see now, even amongst this conversation of whether it's high and low, whether it's avant-garde or commercial, is a real explosion of Black culture amongst all ranks, right? You know, Black Panther being a blockbuster success. A billion-dollar industry, a billion-dollar franchise across the world. Like, we've never seen numbers like this ever before. We've never seen popular and high art success amongst Black culture. So we're now talking about it being, we are now looking at our art and our expression, but more importantly, our humanity through a broad lens and not through a narrow one. So I say that all to say is that I think there is room, I believe that there's room for all of it. There has to be. And if we're only forcing ourselves to define our humanity through a very narrow lens, we're actually almost demeaning our own humanity.
No, that's
we're actually cutting off spaces for our own full selves to exist.
Well, beautifully said. I have always envied Tyler Perry's audiences, you know, and he's obviously a really smart man, you know. I don't know what is, you know, next level I go to is what's his politics. When you have a huge franchise like that, maybe it's unfair. Is he interested in the social contract? What is his work? What is all of his success? Now, this is a gnarly question, isn't it? Because you could come back and bite me in the ass, but what is his success at the service of? Artists do not have to be responsible people, or do they? So I envy his acumen, and I think he built it honestly, you know? But do we ask that of other artists? I think you may, what artists in particular are you talking about? Do we ask it of, like, Steven Spielberg? Wow. My brother. I have to call Steve up and see what he thinks about. No, I mean, like, what are Steven Spielberg's politics? Yeah.
Or do we ask it of the Coen brothers, right? I mean, I think, you know, there is a space for broad slapstick comedy, you know, amongst our white counterparts, and but yet we relegate all of our artists to be everything to everyone. And that's simply not true. It's not capable. We're not capable of doing that. So we've got to, how do we make space for all at the table?
Yeah. You know, it's a really great question because in a way, it's theirs. You know, they made it. And I feel like I'm a latecomer. And if we're talking about American popular film, you know, literally, they invented, I've just recently been working in Los Angeles and working on a big film project, right? And I was made aware that you got to realize there was a handful of 6 guys, many of them who changed their names from extremely Jewish names to Samuel Golden or Mayer or Warner or whatever. They were there. Somebody sold fans, somebody sold shoes. And they went out west to set up another kind of business. So they were always pretty clear about how commerce and art worked for them. So do I ask of them, Spielberg I think is a child of that system. Do I ask of him anything other than to entertain me? Sorry? We never asked Quentin Tarantino anything like that? I get the feeling you have an axe to grind, my brother. But I know Quentin Tarantino, there are times I want to like punch the guy out. He's a smart ass, But I give him a pass, the same pass that I give to a lot of performance artists, people who, simply because they're so rambunctious and so thumbing their nose at so much, I say, yeah, the culture needs that guy. He is expressing an alternative to the rank and file. Quentin Tarantino, I think I see him as, I'm not crazy about all of his art, but I see him as an auteur. I see him as an artist. In a way, I'm saying I see him as a fellow traveler. Are you a filmmaker? No? You're an actor? Uh-huh. All right, yeah.
This is...
You work in music, yeah.
I've just been trying to understand why I'm sort of late to the conversation, why I sort of let it pass me by. And I think it's sort of, I'm thinking that it has something to do with my age. For me, Tyler Perry has always been around. I went to Tyler Perry stage plays in Detroit with my family after church. And so the idea that he was making and creating this thing has never not been a thing. And I think that's a great privilege for us to be thinking in right now, that like all of these spaces are open and available. Also, I'm a child of Oprah Winfrey. There's always been a black woman on my television show, on my screen, in that place of privilege.
Yeah, and she has taken her place of privilege, hasn't she? She is. Don't mess up on her show, because you have to come on in a tone, and America has given her that, That's the other side of what we ask black women to do so much of. But one thing we want them to be is morally exemplars, right? And it doesn't hurt if you're a billionaire as well. It means you're a good businesswoman. So she's kind of formidable, isn't she, in that regard? I always wanted to be as renegade as the white boys. And then I said, I want to be renegades and white boys, but now pay me. And that was a turn. That was a turn, because I was giving it away, man. Naked. It's like shouting everything I'm thinking and feeling to the world, because I thought the project is freedom. Freedom! This is what mine looks like. But hold up here. What you have, there's not a limited supply of it, an unlimited supply of it. Maybe you should start putting a price tag on it. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, for me it was, oh shit, I'm gonna have to, I had a grandparent die. And I went, oh shit, I gotta retire.
Oh, right.
And I was like, oh shit, oh my God, I mean, the art I'm making ain't gonna make no money. And so I was like, let me be a leader. Let me start running things.
And I know some of our forebears are laughing at us. You mean you just figured that out? Like, yeah. Anybody else? How we doing? Yes, hello.
Hi, my name's Maria, and I've been enjoying hearing the conversation tonight. I have a question, probably more to Niegel. So I understand the opera space, and I just find it so fascinating that it's like so antiquated and wants to hold on. It's like if you think about Renaissance art, or you think about, certain forms of literature, they just keep repeating this, so you think of story, right? So they repeat the same story, and now a lot of those stories have become sexist and racist, and they try to hide Don Giovanni, but that story still exists. So my curiosity is, how is that going to evolve? Like, you start to see, like The Hours came out, and then Terrence Blanchard's doing some work there. So I keep wondering, like, is that what's going to happen? Like, what do you, and since you're in that space, I thought you might see, because we still love to be a part of, like, that. The voices are remarkable, but sometimes the stories.
You're speaking of opera.
Yes, just that, but probably a lot of the classic disciplines, but opera in particular, is that, the average age is 95. I think that, there's a profile of who still wants that story. So anyway, that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we go back to what my colleague Kamilah was just saying earlier. It's about the commissioning of the new canon. I can tell you about The Ritual of Breath is the Right to Resist, but because two opera makers got together and commissioned it. There's an incredible festival here in New York City every January, the Prototype Festival. Beth Morrison Projects here, Art Center.
Bravo, yes.
I mean, phenomenal. For 10 years, they've been bringing us 5 to 6 new operas, investing in it, Pulitzer Prizes, developing audiences around it. I mean, even Houston Grand Opera is now starting to get into the game. But that's what it's going to take for the Forum to stay relevant and to keep moving. It's an investment.
Houston was there. It used to be one of the most adventurous opera houses in the country, and I guess maybe that was eclipsed, and now they're back again, right?
Now they're back again.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
This question goes back to maybe more audience cultivation and talking more about culture, and primarily, I guess, goes to Kamilah and for Niegel. So when you're with an institution that has a history, right? You have a history at this institution. Cultivating a new audience then, to some degree, means cultivating a new culture for the space. And so, for example, Dominique Morisseau in theater, in a lot of her plays, now she'll have a one sheet where she's actually talking, like explicitly saying, you can comment in this space. You can, this is church for some people. This might not be church for you, but it might be church for the person next to you. And so, so actually talking explicitly about what the permissions are for that space. And I think that's really interesting right now in terms of our work, because for you, Bill, I know, like, coming from the dance world, there's a specific, people walk into the dance world with an idea of what they're coming to do.
There was a protocol,
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And so can you all talk maybe about, in your own personal development of being an institution and then thinking about cultivating new audiences, how do you cultivate the culture of that space to be equitable for people and for people to feel at home, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I'm going to take this one first because my project was taking a predominantly white institution based in exploitative practices and turning it into a culturally specific Black and brown and queer
That
space.
part.
So
let's do it. The exploitative practices.
Yeah.
Is that telling
Oh,
tales?
no, it's not telling too much. I mean, it was the Flea for many years had a really robust and exciting volunteer artist program. And that was fed by the sense that you could come to New York and cut your teeth by doing something for free. Okay? So that is what these things, these insidious things that Bill and I talk about like, we got to get out. You just do the art because you got to do it, and no one is letting you do it, and you can't get a job, so I'm going to go somewhere where I can get it done. The Flea was that space. Okay? And in this last several years, 4 years ago, we had the opportunity to shift it totally and fully. The community said enough. A lot of people left. A lot of money left. Okay? And in that came the opportunity. Nona Hendricks, I was so dear, my dear friend, became the chairwoman of our board.
Nona, huh?
Yeah, you didn't know this.
No, I didn't know that.
And Candace Jackson, one of our queens from Harlem, came down with her strategic visioning, and we remade it from the inside. Okay, what do we stand for as individuals? And particularly, I'm thinking about what does it mean for us to be at a lobby? Okay, so in the Flea before, in pre-times, we're like, okay, the show is done, thanks, the doors are closing, awesome, you can take the conversation to the bar. That was the culture. Now the culture is, oh, we have drinks and there's food and there's some music playing, okay? I mean, the last show, the show's turned into that space. Okay, so it was baked into the art of it. And so it's about how, you're asking, how does the space, how do we transform, how do we allow the culture itself to just permeate every experience? I had a situation, because a part of our model for paying people above wage and above standards and such is to rent, which means that our renters need to accept our values. But that don't always happen, okay? Sometimes I have to say to someone, look, we're human-centered. You ask someone their name and you speak to them first before you make a request. Okay?
Kamilah, do you have anything about audience development?
I think, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I think about, and part of when I think about the range of even just work, when we talk about invitation, Bill, the season that we presented your opera, We Shall Not Be Moved, that you directed, several weeks later, we had a celebration of Teddy Riley and the New Jack Swing.
Oh, yeah.
In the same space. And I think that really, we talked a lot about what that meant to us as an institution. What does that invitation need to look like and vary from show to show? From a show that required a sense of leaning in, as We Shall Not Be Moved did, an intense sense of listening. How does our front of house staff welcome people differently for that kind of a work? While at the same time, our audiences and experience for Teddy Riley was vastly different. And yet they were all representative of the Black experience. So this is a conversation that we are constantly having and constantly refining, because I also think culture is something that is constantly moving. And it is not static nor stagnant. And therefore, we as an institution have to make sure that our practices and our processes do not remain static or stagnant. I've been in theater spaces across the country that I've worked in across the country, from presenting houses, large presenting houses like Kennedy Center and beyond. And much of our art that we want to, whether canonize, whether it's the classics, et cetera, we are building our institutions, or there was a time in which we were building our institutions to be just as codified and as still as the work, whether that be ballet and orchestra, et cetera. These are the rules in which you come in. When I'm coming to watch Swan Lake, I know exactly how it's gonna start. I know the middle, I know the end, I know the coda, et cetera, right? If we're now making a commitment in which we all three have of cultural arts institutions that are making space for culture that is ever evolving, the practices under which that culture and the space has to be just as flexible, down to space, to greeting, to procedures, to how you rehearse, to when you rehearse. I think we're learning that, we're seeing that now, is that the work is asking for that kind of flexibility. So, again.
Kamilah, have you resorted to, what did you say, sir? You said that you've been to shows where they hand a sheet that tells you.
Dominique more so in the theater specifically. So in the playbill, they'll actually have a one sheet that says some of the audience members will want to respond to this. And that's okay.
Right.
Typically in standard white theater, people come in,
Yeah.
lights turn off, and that's it. And so there's that mix, right? What do we want the space to be?
Yeah. Did you hear that, Kamilah? Sorry, we were. Yes, please. I interrupted you. Go for it.
Oh, no, I missed what he was saying. I'm sorry.
Yes. Do you want the microphone again so he could, the addendum to what you were saying?
He was speaking to Dominique Morceau's Etiquette for the Theater program insert.
Yeah. And in regards to that program insert, I mean, I think that was in direct response to, again, we're talking about Black and brown audiences being invited into a space that was the traditional rules were not taking their cultural experience in mind. And that piece of paper now being the invitation to be your full self. And now we're beginning to see theaters across the country doing just that same practice. We were out in San Francisco, and I saw the theater actually had posted very similar language that Dominique had wrote inside the program insert in the lobby of their theater, in the elevators of their theater, as an acknowledgement that actually prior to this moment, our rules were asking you to do just the opposite. Our rules of our engagement were asking you to do just the opposite.
I'm feeling a little, this is really a wonderful conversation. I have, at New York Live Arts, we've been really working like everybody else to get a critical mass of our trustees to be people of color. We're doing pretty well, but it always feels like there's a lot of goodwill there, wonderful people on the board. It's hard to get people who can make the financial commitment, the people who have, but I say this because we have one person who has proven to be a leader in a way, a black board member. And I do remember when she and I met with the other newbie, a black man, and she was saying, you know, there's something about being in a black space, I mean a white space as the black people, that we start performing our blackness. And you know, like when do you step over that line, you know? So now we're letting everyone know, you're all free to be black. It's not my way to get up and shake my butt or whatever, you know. But I want you to be with this program. You got to get up and, well, are we in fact asking people to take on new personas? Is this what you mean by take risk and what have you?
I think it's about liberation to be your authentic self. I mean, you know, authentic movement. So in that space, if you don't have to check yourself in this space. You can laugh. If you want to sit quietly and let it wash over you, you can make that choice as well. So I don't think it's a push to have to perform audience in a certain way. But permission, because we also know how to police ourselves. We know how to be in white spaces. And this is an invitation to undo some of that.
Oh, we know how to be in white spaces. Actually, I don't really know enough how to be in what we call serious black art spaces. Now, are those terms I put together, serious black art spaces, is that a problematic construction? Serious black art spaces.
I mean, because what is unserious about my play, about my laughter, about my sending up my uncle's walk? What is unserious about that?
Now, do I want to watch, I didn't see The Death of the Salesman. Do I want Death of a Salesman as somebody to be testifying in the audience as it's happening? You know, or The Crucible or whatever, or do I, as a director or as an audience member, I go for the language? Do I go for the theoleptic religious experience that oftentimes black experience is? And that's no mean trick. I don't know if you guys have had success in being able to do the both. Give people permission to be their truest self, speak loud, speak back at the stage when the stage is about the words. I saw Ain't No Mo. Did you go see it? Yeah.
That's one of the prime examples of what I was thinking about.
I was really moved when I got there. First of all, it was like the room was like on fire. Everyone knew it was happening, and Lena was in the audience and the whole bit. And then this voice is like, "Listen, bitches, tonight, if you want to dance, you dance." And there were people that took them on their word. There were times I wish, brother, would you please sit down? Please, I'm trying to understand. You know, it was live, it was real, but it was on the verge of being, and here's another dangerous term, out of control.
I love that.
Yeah, am I revealing my colonialized aesthetic nature, right?
Well, I love that because
No.
Wait, I want to hear. Someone please hand this person a microphone.
She's one of ours.
Yes, I work at New York Live Arts. I don't think it was out of control. I think it wasn't meant for everybody. And that's just me speaking, seeing the play. I think it was for black and brown people. So when you have a diverse group of people, you're gonna get mixed reviews because they have not experienced those type of things. So therefore, you're going to get the people shouting. You're gonna look at them like, why are they doing that? Because they don't know our culture and our experiences. So I don't say it's out of control. It's just foreign to certain people.
Yeah.
And I think, Bill, if you want to create the work where the audience is being there with the language, you know this better than I do. It's in the form, it's in the delivery. Like how we deliver it will communicate to our audience what the breath is, what the tempo is, what the one is. I mean, I'm thinking about Chapel Chapter.
Yeah.
Like I knew from the beginning of that. This is a work for the folks who don't know. Bill's company made that took place inside of it took place in the gatehouse.
Yes, but it was made into a sacred space.
Right, it was made into a sacred space. Mm-hmm. And I knew to change my breath and my cadence.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add a little thing about like out of control and just say that also in those types of audiences, people know how to check themselves. And that just because somebody's dancing doesn't mean that when silence is required, people won't be silent. Or like you can talk, but somebody else on the other side will just get up and tell you, shut up. And it's also part of the experience and of how people engage.
You mean the
with
audience
each other.
actually controlling each other?
Yeah. And it's part of the thing. And it's part of the thing of like when we get together and it's fine. If we all agree that this is what we came to do.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And unfortunately, we need to wrap up.
Wow. Is there anything you want to say or express? You want to storm the stage? What have you? Kamilah, thank you so much, Kamilah Forbes.
Thank you.
Niegel.
So good to see you, sister.
Thank you, President. And thank you all for being here. This is a real pleasant talk. Thank you very much.